So, Mike, I have a question for you.
Mm,
What is a podcast? Because people say, "Hey, you guys, I
mm.
love your podcast," but you know, I thought a podcast was just audio only. When did a podcast become like a YouTube video?
I don't know. It's, when we make words up, it's a dynamic language. The whole thing started from the iPod, right? And it's called a podcast because you would listen to it on your iPod, which was an audio only thing. You
Well,
know,
I mean, look,
can't
there are a
call
bunch of
these TV shows either, right?
and there's a bunch of old TV terms. I mean, you still call things B-roll, even though there's nothing actually like rolling.
That's right.
So there is
That's
that.
I take issue with that. Everybody, journalists, we have the footage. No, you don't. You have an image on a disc. Footage.
All right, well, let's talk about InfoSec, shall we?
All right.
A bunch of really big things happening. Number one is that today you and Fred are joining up with John Rigi from the American Hospital Association to talk about the changes in regulation and
Yes.
compliance needs and the like for the healthcare sector, which you're going to talk about the healthcare sector, but it's really true for all critical infrastructure, right?
Yes, federal government's really leaning into the use of the NIST cybersecurity framework, and they're really leaning into mandatory reporting. And you must have some kind of governance structure around information security in your organization. This is reflected in what's coming out of the SEC from HHS. It's everywhere. So,
Mhm.
I mean, the messaging is pretty clear. Now, how do we get organizations to get there? Especially when they think, we bought a firewall and some antivirus, we're good. No, you're not good.
um, the other thing, and so anyway, you can sign up for that. That's
That's
happening
today.
today. If you need a link to sign up, email me, Jake@criticalinsight.com, and I'll send it to you. Also, if you want the recording, if you're watching this after it happened today, let me know. The other big thing is we released our healthcare breach report this week, and did a great panel, and the feedback has been phenomenal. And I got to tell you, Mike, one of the pieces of feedback that I got from a healthcare executive was one of the things that I really like about your report is it's not fluffy. Like
Mhm.
it's actual numbers and tells me something where there are a lot of cyber companies that release like, oh my gosh, breaches are up, but don't have really underlying data. They just say, trust us. We see
Yeah.
this.
There's an article
Um,
like that today, as a matter of fact.
yeah. And so that report you can see on our website, and happy to again send you a copy if you want it.
Mhm.
But that was good. Also, you just came back from Oregon. What were you doing there?
The Oregon Association of Government IT Managers, which is exactly what it sounds like. I was really helping with grant strategy. Oregon is just about to pull the trigger on its implementation of the state local cyber grant program. They're going to do it differently than we did it in Washington. I explained how we did it here, everything I knew about how they're going to do it there. I talked about, and there's a smart way to go about this in the first round of the grant, which is to ask for money from the grant to get yourself an assessment
Yep.
against the NIST framework,
Yep.
which will inform your request for the next round of the grant, which has already started.
Yep.
So that's kind of the guidance I was giving, and it was pretty well received.
And by the way, we're putting together all critical infrastructure here. We did just hear from a hospital that's a customer of ours that they believe that they will be able to get some of the money because they have an elected board.
Yeah.
So it sort of works for anyone. If you have questions about that, Mike's your guy. Let him know. Hit him up. He's very much happy to help. Okay. Big news. Usually we start here domestically, but today I think we need to start at Ecuador, because
Ecuador.
it might have some implications for us. Mike, what's going on?
Well, so Ecuador, I mean, over the last 10 years, and I've known people that have gone down and moved to Ecuador, and it's this like fantastic place and seem to be stable. Well, now the politics going off the rails. Um, so this is a little nuanced. There is a way that we vote in this country, and other countries have employed the same method, and it's for something called UOCAVA voting, which is Uniformed Overseas Citizens, blah blah blah,
Hmm.
Accessible Voting Act, or something like that. And it's for expatriates, deployed military, things like that. It's not really online voting, but it's closer to DocuSign. Well, in Ecuador, they were using that kind of voting for their expatriates, for their citizens that were
Sure.
abroad, and the attacks came from 7 countries trying to stop that kind of voting, specifically that kind of voting, because it does have this internet nexus,
Hmm.
and it seemed to get a little messy there, and so now we're going to wonder, is there going to be litigation around this? Are there going to be lawsuits, claims of elections being stolen? Which seems to be a
Well, I
playbook
mean,
being employed, right?
if and well, I mean, and if it did happen, it gives credence
Yeah,
to folks.
and it
I mean,
the
I
could
think
have
that's
changed the
the
outcome of the election. Yeah,
right.
it could have changed the
I think
outcome.
that's the biggest thing here. All right.
Yeah.
Um, Also, there's a, big story, about North Korea and money laundering. You wanna tell people about that one?
Well, there's a factoid in there that I think makes this a big story for us. And so 2 individuals were arrested, and they had set up something called Tornado Cash, which is a
Mhm,
cryptocurrency mixer, otherwise known as a money laundering vehicle. And what they were doing is they were laundering money for the North Korean Lazarus Group,
mhm.
which, as we know, goes to fund, at least in part, weapons programs in North Korea.
That's nice.
So 2 people were arrested, and the exchange was sanctioned, can't be used. And one of those individuals was Russian, and one was from Auburn, Washington, which I can drive to in an hour. So it's I think the lure of the dark side and the ability to make tons of money working alongside really bad actors
Mhm.
is a little overwhelming for some people. They get sucked into that. Now, they laundered like $1 billion, and now they're going to prison.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The something we've touched on a bunch here, is the U.S. Space Force,
Hmm.
right? And things are always in the news here, and they pique interest. I just saw the number one most clicked on article on one major website was, India just was the fourth country to land something on the moon.
Yep.
Um, and, as we launch more things into space, and by the way, I just listened to an amazing podcast about Starlink and how that all got set up and who's going to compete with Starlink. There's all these articles about cyber risk, which I guess not surprising. But there's a brand new bulletin about this.
Yeah, there's warnings coming out from several places about how before we were hearing about satellites are vulnerable,
Hmm.
and the federal government even brought together the hacking community to see what they could do and hack satellites, and sure enough they were able to do this. We know that they've been taken over, ground stations, etc., been taken over in Russia by activists. And what the article is about is not so much the vulnerability of satellites, but it's the vulnerability of the US space economy. So it's like anything else. When we start adding all kinds of technology to, drive new business and new opportunities and things like this, you increase your attack surface, and people start to pile onto that. Well,
Hmm.
we're about at the pylon stage for the space economy. We have lots of rocket manufacturers. Starlink has got the great constellation up there. Everybody's getting into the business here. Pretty soon we'll be mining asteroids. All that's going to come with vulnerabilities, and hopefully some of the things that we're doing from the federal level to get better software developed, you know, demonstrably, hopefully will help that. But right now it's looking like, we're charging headlong into this new economic opportunity, and we're not thinking this through all the way, what the implications could be. There's a bunch of warnings out about this.
So what's your ransomware in space?
Mm.
When's the first time you think something in space gets locked up and the ransom's like $200 million?
I I don't know. That's I'm not going to say that's not going to happen. That we've seen stranger things. I hate to say that we've seen stranger things.
which also is a good show on Netflix. So, by the way, speaking of federal government, there's a very interesting thing this week about utilities,
Yes.
and yeah, and the energy sector and the ability now to raise rates to pay for cyber.
Yeah, and I hope we're interpreting this in the right way because it's a little read between the linesy on this one. Um, they're
Read
talking about,
between the linesy.
yeah. Come on,
Okay.
it's a dynamic language. So the title of the article is "Securing Critical Infrastructure with the Carrot and Stick." All right, we already know what the stick is. It's going to be regulation, and if you don't meet the regulation or you have made assertions that you have and you
Hmm.
actually have, there's fines. There's all these things happen, right?
Hmm.
But the carrot, so our energy infrastructure, especially as we develop green energies and things like this, again, we're expanding our attack surface because we've got all this new technology there. Well, what they're saying is, in order for you to build security in, we know it's going to cost money, and so the
Hmm.
federal government is going to incentivize this by allowing them to recover costs through rate increases. That's the way I interpret what I read here.
Hmm.
And so, typically there's just a lack of money to invest when we're
Hmm.
talking about utilities because you have to go to utility commissions to ask for rate increases to pay for stuff. And they always say no. So this is federal government coming in as a backstop and saying, we will support this and allow you to raise rates in order to pay for security because we got to have you doing this. That
Mm.
sounds smart to me. I
Yeah.
hope I'm interpreting that the right way.
Well, if you're wrong, then it's the internet, and somebody
I'm,
will
I'll,
tell you.
I will call Pete Buttigieg. I will ask him.
Do you have his number?
How hard could it be to get?
That's fair.
I have
That's
Maltego, okay?
uh-huh, hey, and you had talked about just coming from Oregon.
Hmm.
They're announcing $6 million
Yep.
to enhance cybersecurity.
That's round two. So that was an announcement from Senator Wyden's office saying
Okay,
about how round two has just been. Well, Oregon is just now starting
doing
to
round
distribute
one.
round one, right?
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And the
And
way
how
this
much? Wait,
works,
wait. So, and how much did Washington release in its first round?
about $3 million.
Okay, so Oregon's doing twice as much.
No, round two is $6 million in Oregon. Round
Got it.
one is $2.7 million or something like that in Oregon.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's very confusing, Mike. Very
Right, which is
confusing.
why, the small pot of money, use that to do the assessment, figure out what your corrective action plan is, and that's the stuff you're going to, use to be the basis of your ask for the next round of the grant, which is twice as large.
Got it. Okay. All right. So for any state local folks paying attention, email Mike.
No problem.
That's what I got out of that.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. Threats and vulns. What do you got?
Oh, a bunch of them. Speaking of conferences, every time we go to a conference, Veeam is there, right? VEEAM, backup
Hmm.
company.
Hmm.
So some ransomware called the Cuba ransomware is now using a Veeam exploit against what are called critical U.S. organizations. Everybody feels their own organization is critical, so I don't know what they mean by that. So watch out. There's a patch for Veeam. Apply it. RAR is a compression format. So when RAR has a flaw that
Hmm.
lets somebody run a program when you open an archive, right? So it's not just a
Hmm.
bunch of files that have been compressed. It's actually an executable. And if you want to peek in there, it's going to run malware. That's great. Um, smart bulbs like the ones that you have alongside your smart espresso machine and Ring doorbell are allowing people to steal your Wi-Fi password, which is
Hmm.
definitely not good.
Nope.
That because then they can start stealing, all the rest of your credentials pretty easily. Juniper project products have a patch out that you need to apply now because there is active exploit going on. The CVSS rating on this is 9.8, so that's fairly critical.
9.8 is bad.
9.8 is bad.
9.8 is bad.
Ivanti is warning of a mobile iron 0-day. The CVE on that is 38035. So if you use that product, make sure that you have some compensating controls in place. CISA is warning about Adobe Cold Fusion
Hmm.
being exploited and Patch Chrome.
I mean, you should just always patch Chrome. And just as a reminder, you should always be that person who, in a meeting, when somebody has not patched Chrome, that you say, "Hey, you should patch Chrome." I actually
Yeah.
did that with somebody yesterday, but it was Edge.
It
Told him
was
to patch
Edge.
the easy little thing on Edge.
Edge is
Yeah.
Chrome under the hood, just like Android is Linux under the hood. That's a bad analogy, but okay.
But other than that, it's fine. Okay. All right. At the end of all of these, there's a kicker, something to make people laugh. What do you got?
Using generative AI to resurrect the dead will create a burden for the living. All right. That is a really interesting title that caught my eye. And when I read this, it was about the amount of energy that would have to go into training and maintaining chatbots that emulate a person who is now deceased, right? It can be trained with things
Oh,
that are the equivalent of their memories, it can simulate their voice, facial expressions. And so this could probably provide a lot of comfort to somebody. But in order to do this, it's going to cost really a lot of money, power, CPU, all of that. Apparently, Chat GPT just by itself is about $700,000 a day to run.
yeah, I
And
buy that. I mean,
we're
that's
talking
why
about
Microsoft,
OpenAI being
yeah.
bankrupt by 2024. Here's the money quote though. This is not a sustainable model for immortality. That was just a great quote.
I can't wait to start foundingfathers.ai. Ask George Washington whatever you want to know. That's what
Just
I'm going to do.
let's ask James Madison about what did you mean in the Constitution when you said that?
ask
Settle this
John
once and for all.
Ask John Hancock, did you know your signature was going to become that famous? All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Have a
Yeah.
great day. And remember, send me a note, Jake at criticalinsight.com. If you want a link to the American Hospital Association webinar today or the healthcare breach report, and hit Mike up, mike.hamilton at criticalinsight.com for help with the state local cyber grants.
Yep.
He is, I'd say he's happy to help, but I'm just volunteering him for that. All
Yeah.
right, everybody. Have a